Hey everyone, in this video we're going to learn about how to rationalize the denominator. So let me write down a quick example. Let's say we had 3 over the square root or radical 3. Okay, so 3 over radical 3, what it means to rationalize the denominator is that our denominator contains a radical. In this case right here, radical 3. And normally we don't like writing fractions where the denominator is irrational. So the name to rationalize the denominator means to eliminate whatever radicals there are in the denominator. So how exactly do we do that in this case? We have 3 over radical 3. How do we rationalize this? So what we can do is take advantage of the fact that the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. This radical 3 times radical 3 equals 3. In fact, this works for any number. Radical x, so let me write that, radical x times radical x equals x. And the reason why this works is because if you take the square root of something, radical x, and then you're multiplying it by itself, so you're essentially squaring it, the square and the square root cancel out because they are inverses of each other. Taking the square root of something and then squaring it gets you back to where you started, which is x. So we have this rule right here. Radical x times radical x is x. So how do we use this to rationalize the denominator? Well, what we can do, erase these, is, okay, radical 3, I know that if I multiply radical 3 by radical 3, then I will get 3 in the denominator. Perfect, but we can't just multiply the denominator by radical 3. If we do that, we also have to multiply the numerator by radical 3. So, okay, no problem. We're going to multiply the top and bottom by radical 3. So what's radical 3 times radical 3? That is just 3. And what is 3 times radical 3? Well, that is just what it is, 3 radical 3. It doesn't simplify any further. So 3 radical 3 over 3, and actually we can divide these 3's right here. 3 divided by 3, cancel each other out. And then this gives us radical 3 as the final answer. So 3 over radical 3 simplifies to radical 3. Perfect. Now, let me give another example that's slightly more complicated. Let's say we had 8 over 1 plus the square root of 5. Now, we can't quite do the same thing here. Let's go ahead and try to do the same thing we did before, just quickly to show you why it doesn't work. We say, hey, there's a radical 5. Why don't I multiply the top and bottom by radical 5? Well, the problem is if you do that, there's a parentheses around here, you'll have to distribute this radical 5. Let me just put that in a different color. You'll have to distribute this radical 5, so radical 5 times 1, radical 5 times radical 5. And then this comes out to 8 radical 5 over radical 5 times 1 is radical 5, and radical 5 times 5 is 5, so plus 5. And this doesn't quite solve our problem because there's still a radical in the denominator. We still have this radical 5. So that doesn't quite work. So whenever you come across a situation like this, where the denominator is irrational and it has more than one term. There are two terms in here. There's the positive 1 and positive radical 5. There are two terms. In this situation, what we're going to do, instead of multiplying just by the radical number, we're going to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. So let me write that out. The conjugate. So 1 second. Conjugate. So this is best explained through an example. The conjugate of 1 plus radical 5 is 1 minus radical 5. So how you get to the conjugate is you flip the sign of the second term. So the sign between these two terms is a plus. You're going to flip that sign and it becomes a minus. And then, just as another quick example, let's say we wanted to find the conjugate of 3 minus radical 6. So the conjugate of this is simply 3 plus radical 6. That is all a conjugate is. And the reason why conjugates are so useful is because the conjugate, as we said, of 1 plus radical 5 is 1 minus radical 5. And we are going to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. 1 minus radical 5 over 1 minus radical 5. So let me erase these. And let's start with the numerator first. This is a little easier. So 8 times 1 minus radical 5 in parentheses. What we can do is distribute this 8 times 1, and 8 times negative radical 5. And 8 times 1 is 8. And 8 times negative radical 5 is negative 8 radical 5. Okay, that's the numerator. Now the denominator is going to be a little different. When you have two terms, and you can't quite distribute the same way, whereas in the numerator you just have one term, 8, and you can distribute this 8 to each term on the inside of the parentheses, to the 1 and to the negative radical 5. In this situation, we have to do it twice. So to multiply these two binomials, these two terms that have two terms each, what we're going to do, first we're going to distribute the 1 to this 1 and the 1 to this negative radical 5. And then we'll distribute the radical 5 to the 1 and the radical 5 to the negative radical 5. And I'll explain this more in a later video, but what we're doing here is called FOIL. F-O-I-L, FOIL. And that is how you multiply two binomials. You use FOIL. So I'll explain that more in a later video, but this is how you would multiply these two binomials. So let's start with the first one, 1 times 1. 1 times 1 is 1. And then 1 times negative radical 5 is negative radical 5. And now over here, now we're up to here, radical 5 times 1 is positive radical 5. Let me just change the color of this so it's easier to follow. So just again, 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times negative radical 5 is negative radical 5. Then radical 5 times 1 is plus positive radical 5. And then radical 5 times negative radical 5. So this part. So this is negative, and then radical 5 times radical 5 is 5. Perfect. And the beauty of multiplying a binomial by the conjugate is that these two terms in the middle, the negative radical 5 and the positive radical 5, they always cancel out. So we are left here with just 1 minus 5. Scroll down. We are left with 1 minus 5 in the denominator. So again, that's the denominator. And let me rewrite this again. So in the numerator, we had 8 minus 8 radical 5. And then in the denominator, we had 1 minus 5, which we can further simplify. 1 minus 5 is simply 4. So if we keep going, 8 minus 8 radical 5 over, apologies, 1 minus 5 is actually negative 4. Negative 4. And we can go ahead and keep simplifying. So we have 8 minus 8 radical 5 over negative 4. What we can do is then separate these into two fractions, 8 over negative 4 minus 8 radical 5 over negative 4. So what's 8 over negative 4? That evaluates to negative 2. And minus 8 over negative 4. So what is negative 8 over negative 4? So negative 8 over negative 4. That's positive 2. And then we're left with this radical 5 right here. So radical 5. So negative 2 plus 2 radical 5 is the final answer in this situation. So that is how we rationalize a denominator. And I really hope this video helps. And please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thank you for watching.